Whether you love or hate Amazon, there's no denying they have incredible communication skills when it comes to letting you know as their customer exactly where your order is up to. You can track where the parcel is in the factory, if it's been delivered, if it's in a sorting office, if it's in a van on its way to you, if it's ready to be picked up at a local post office. Like wherever your parcel is, you are aware. And as a client, as a customer, it puts your mind at rest. It makes you feel confident in the service that they are providing for you. And even when there are delays, it makes you less likely to actually reach out to their customer service, which is obviously a cost to Amazon as a business, because you can see where the delays are and when the expected new delivery time will be. All of this has obviously taken them a long time to set up, and it's pretty slick. However, these same principles can be applied to many examples in our small businesses. And today I want to talk through a couple of case studies of examples where we've implemented a simple system for doing something similar for two different clients. One is a high-end estate agent in London, and we're going to be talking about the return of deposits and how we can keep people informed of that process. And the second one is an expert witness agency who communicates with solicitors and lawyers and actually keeping them up to date with what's going on. Really simple stuff, but absolutely game-changing in terms of the way your clients will perceive you as a company because of how brilliant you communicate with them and doing all this in a relatively or completely automated way. So the question is this: how do entrepreneurs like us who don't have an endless supply of cash, how do we leverage the best apps, virtual assistants, automation tools and systems to scale our businesses, increase our profits and have more time to do what we love to do each day? That is the question, and this podcast will give you the answer. My name's Dr. Steve Day, and this is Systemize Your Success. Today I want to talk about a couple of case studies. First, we've got a high-end estate agent in London. I'm going to be talking through their tenant deposit return process and how we revolutionized the way the communication is done on that particular part of their service to improve the overall satisfaction, get better ratings, improve the experience of their customers and the knock-on effect of their landlords as well. And secondly, we're going to be talking about a expert witness business who deals with lawyers and connects them to doctors, and how we have yet to implement, but we talked about this today, which is why this podcast is being recorded, about how we are going to improve the communication to the lawyers so they feel they've got an exceptional service, even though the expert witness business is doing nothing different except for sending a few emails or providing some information which they already have. Let me explain this in a bit more detail. So in the first case, we've got a estate agency who has tenants, and those tenants give a deposit to the estate agency when they move in, and then when they move out, they get the deposit back. I'm sure you're familiar with this process if you've ever rented a house or you know anyone that has. And this is one of those points in your client's journey, if you're a landlord and you have clients who are tenants, that can cause a lot of friction. That tenant desperately wants their money back. They think you're going to steal all of their money by charging them for things that they haven't done or overcharge them, etc. So there's a huge amount of fear and tension and emotion in this time of the end of the relationship you have with that particular client. And so making this journey, this end part of this journey, as slick and as painless as possible is important. But we can't, unfortunately, as estate agents or landlords, speed up the process very much because there are certain things that have to happen. For example, when a tenant moves out, there has to be a checkout done where they do a report, and that report has to be analysed, and then we have to get quotes for the repair cost, and the costs have to be approved by the landlord. And then once that happens, they can then send the quote to the tenant to get that approved in order to then release the deposit. This is a fixed set of processes that have to really happen on all cases where there's any damages in the property, and therefore there's going to be a deduction to the deposit. So if in scenario one, without any communication, the tenant leaves, the next thing they know, about four weeks later, they get a email saying, here's how much we're going to deduct from your deposit. Is that okay? In version 2, the improved version, the tenant leaves, the next day they get an email saying, this is our process for the return of your deposit. First, we have to do a checkout. This is scheduled on this date. On that date, we will do a full review of the property and then and mark down anything that we feel is needing of repair or cleaning that may be your liability. We will then proceed to get quotes for that work. Once those quotes are received, we will then need to get approval from the landlord. And once the landlord has approved that, we'll be able to then offer you a deduction offer, whatever you want to call that, for you to then approve or challenge, depending on the outcome of that. If you would need to challenge that, there's a process in place for that using the deposit scheme or whatever. So by going from the old way of literally zero communication, which is what a lot of landlords do, there's this whole period of, I don't know what's happening to my money, where's it going, what's happening, why is it taking so long, to now giving them a clear picture of why the process takes a certain amount of time and the steps involved, and why it's not all down to the estate agents to why it takes four weeks to release their deposit or whatever, and the expectation of what's going to happen next. Then, and this is the key, I think, to making this absolutely brilliant, and what my client, the person I was coaching about this, really, I think, got the light bulb for, was rather than just sending that initial email saying this is what's going to happen, and maybe with them estimated dates for these things, is when it gets to each stage in that process, then just send a quick standardized email to let them know we've now got to the next stage. So, for example, immediately after checking out, send the email saying, hey, here's the process. Once the checkout report's been done, send them an email saying, we've done the checkout report. We're now analyzing it and getting quotes. Next thing, we've received the quotes from the workers or whatever. Next thing, we've got approval from the landlord. So literally walking them through that process and letting them know, just like Amazon does, where their deposit release is up to. That then lets the person know what to expect in terms of timeline, and obviously they know why it's taking a bit longer than they wish it would, but it's actually just part of the journey that unfortunately every deposit has to go through at the end of the tenancy. So doing this sort of thing, you can do it manually to start with. You can also automate it using an email automation client that could be triggered by moving it from one stage to next in a pipeline in your email automation tool, and you could get really fancy with this using linking it through APIs to whatever deposit release systems you use, etc., and maybe using Zapier to connect up. There's loads of ways to really get this super slick, but actually just having somebody who's monitoring the deposit release, just forwarding a templated email each time the person gets to that next stage, is all that you need to do to make a huge difference to that experience that tenant has at the end of their journey with you. And obviously the same sort of process can be applied to lots of different scenarios. And what hopefully you'll see if you do something like that is that actually in the tenant example, that tension point at the end of the tenancy becomes a lot less stressful. And you're more likely, I believe, to get better reviews because you've communicated so well with them, even if you make deductions from the deposit. Because actually, just knowing that that's a possibility ahead of it and actually being really open and transparent about it and giving them a timeline to all the stuff they need to, what's going to happen. I mean, I think that will actually help put people's minds at ease. I know it does for me in simple examples, so no reason why it wouldn't do for other people. Another example, or example number two, or case number two, is my expert witness client. And so they came to me and said, like, how do we improve the experience for our lawyers, when they first come and ask for a report from us, like, how can we make this like an absolutely game-changing experience? And I said pretty much the same thing. It's like, how many steps are there in the report writing process? And we'd literally just gone through the process of creating the system for training their expert witnesses on how to actually create the report. And we've broken it down into a number of steps. Let's just say there were 6 steps for argument's sake. And in the same way that I was just describing with the tenant deposit, and I said, well, okay, so at the end of each stage in this process, you're going to have a better and better idea on the actual delivery date of the report, because every step you get closer to completion, you're going to actually have an even better idea of how long's left to get there, because there's less things that could go wrong. And so why not have 2 things? One is a set of standardized emails out. And as a side note, you could add a nice graphic on these to show, as a graphical thing, which stage they're up to in this process. So make it something visual as well, rather than just saying an email. That can be, the icing on the cake. But so sending them an email, a standard email, when the report gets to each stage in the process means that the lawyer who's waiting for them to proceed with their case, whatever they're working on, can see exactly where it's up to. And then the icing on the cake for this was, like, you know what your estimated delivery time is. Like, one of the things they do is have a delivery date promise. If it's not delivered by this date, they do it for free or something along them lines. And so what I suggested was, okay, well, every time you get a stage earlier, you'll know how many roughly days are left. So you can actually change the estimated due date. So if actually the estimated due date is becoming potentially closer, it actually is a massively positive thing, because suddenly the report they thought was going to be delivered in 4 weeks is suddenly now going to be delivered in 3, and they can see that happening in real time and see where it's up to in the process. And similarly, if it is going to be delayed for some reason, then they can actually know that ahead of schedule and plan for it. So there's nothing going to be left to be surprised about that, okay, it's going to be 2 days late, but actually we knew about that 3 weeks ago, so it wasn't a problem. And so by this simple idea of breaking down the back end stuff, just like Amazon does, they pick it from the warehouse, they stick it in the lorry, gets taken to the sorting office, gets put on the delivery van, it gets delivered to your door, etc. Here's the estimated time for delivery. You're breaking down whatever the process, the back end process is, to you giving the end result to your client, and actually then telling your client what those steps are. So opening up your back-end operations to your client in a really nice way, in a very simple way, to say, there's 6 stages for me delivering this product to you or this service to you. These are the 6 stages. And then at every milestone, every stage, letting them know you've got there so they can see where they're up to in the process. And therefore, they can feel at ease knowing, I know when I'm going to get the thing I've ordered, and therefore, if it's a bit delayed, that's okay, because I knew about it, or if it's going to be early, that's fantastic, even better. There's nothing better, actually, I was thinking now, when you order something from Amazon, and it says it's going to be there in 3 days, and it arrives the next day. That's awesome. No one's ever complained about something arriving early, well, as far as I know anyway. I definitely haven't. And that's the kind of experience you can give to your clients. You give them an estimate, you beat that estimate, they're going to love you for it. There you go. That's it for today. A little tip on improving your customer experience by doing very little in terms of changing your processes, but just by communicating better in a standardized way. And then if you get this systemized, get somebody else to do this for you if you're a small business owner, so get a virtual assistant to do this, or automate this through an email automation service and using whatever zaps and things you need to just make this work. As long as it's not you doing it, this will happen consistently, and therefore your clients will get a consistently fantastic result. If you love this episode, then please do share it with your friends and colleagues. Do leave us a review, hit some comments, ask some questions, or just let me know what your biggest learning from this was. And I will see you next time. Thank you very much indeed.